He was the king of college football, electrifying, unpredictable, and unstoppable. A freshman phenom who took the SEC by storm, stunned Alabama, and won the Heisman Trophy in his first year. Johnny Manziel wasn't just a quarterback, he was a rock star. He transcended the game, becoming a cultural icon almost overnight. Flashing the money sign after touchdowns, hanging out with Drake, popping up in Vegas, and plastered all over ESPN. Everyone wanted a piece of Johnny football, and Johnny seemed more than happy to give it to them. But within just a few years of that meteoric rise, he was out of the NFL. No team, no contract, no comeback. From Johnny football to Johnny fallout, the collapse was stunning and fast. The highlight reels turned into court dates. The headlines shifted from Heisman wins to rehab stints, missed practices, and broken promises. Fans were left wondering, what happened to the kid who had the world at his feet? Was it the fame, the money, the pressure, mental health, or something deeper the world didn't see? In this video, we're going beyond the headlines to uncover what really happened to Johnny Manziel, from the meteoric rise to the haunting downfall and the shocking truth he finally admitted to years later. Welcome to What Really Happened to Johnny Football? The truth behind the collapse. Let's get into it. Johnny Manziel's journey to stardom began in Kerrville, Texas, a small town where his football talent became impossible to ignore. By the time he reached high school, he was already a local legend, breaking records and dazzling fans with his backyard football style. But no one could have predicted what would happen next. When Johnny committed to Texas A&M, the school was entering the SEC, the toughest conference in college football. Most expected the Aggies to struggle in their debut year, especially with a freshman quarterback taking the reins. But Johnny wasn't just any freshman. In 2012, Johnny Manziel took the college football world by storm. He moved like a video game character, dodging defenders, throwing on the run, improvising plays that left coaches speechless. He led the Aggies to a stunning upset over the defending national champion Alabama Crimson Tide, in a game that would instantly define his legacy. That season, Manziel passed for over 3,700 yards and rushed for over 1,400 more. His highlight reels went viral week after week. He played the game with flair, with swagger, and with a confidence that bordered on cocky. And people loved it. Johnny Football became more than a nickname, it was a brand. In December of that year, Johnny Manziel made history as the first freshman to ever win the Heisman Trophy. The ceremony was emotional, electric, and unforgettable. A 20-year-old from Texas had just reached the pinnacle of college football, and he did it his way. But behind the celebrations and record-breaking performances, there were early signs of turbulence. Manziel's name constantly appeared in headlines, not just for his play, but for his off-field antics. Partying, partying, and more partying. Social media was buzzing with photos of Johnny in bars, courtside with celebrities, and rumors swirling about his behavior. While fans were mesmerized by his magic on Saturdays, coaches and insiders were starting to worry. Was the fame getting to him? Could he handle the pressure of being not just a star athlete, but a national icon? Regardless of the doubts, one thing was certain. Johnny Football had arrived, and the NFL was watching. The spotlight wasn't just bright, it was blinding. After Johnny Manziel's historic Heisman win, his life changed overnight. He was no longer just a college quarterback, he was a celebrity. But with that fame came pressure, scrutiny, and temptation. Everywhere Johnny went, the cameras followed. He was spotted courtside at NBA games, hanging out with hip-hop stars like Drake and rubbing shoulders with Hollywood A-listers. He didn't hide from it. He embraced it. His Instagram and Twitter accounts became a highlight reel of fast living. Champagne, private jets, Vegas nights, designer clothes, and flashing cash. He quickly became the face of a new era of college athletes. Bold, unfiltered, and unapologetically himself. But for every fan who admired his confidence, there were critics who saw arrogance. Coaches, analysts, and even teammates began to question whether his priorities were shifting away from football. The media couldn't get enough. ESPN couldn't go a day without mentioning Johnny Football. TMZ ran stories about his nights out. His social life became just as talked about as his stats. Suddenly, a 20-year-old college kid was being treated like a rock star, but without the infrastructure or maturity to manage that fame. Then came the controversies. Reports surfaced of Manziel getting paid to sign autographs, a violation of NCAA rules. Though the investigation never proved he took money, the whispers grew louder. The NCAA suspended him for half of a game to start the 2013 season. Many saw it as a slap on the wrist. Others saw it as the beginning of the end. Manziel continued to play well that season, but his off-field distractions kept piling up. He clashed with coaches. He skipped team events. He was often uncoachable, relying on raw talent rather than preparation or discipline. The pressure was mounting. He was being torn in multiple directions. Football phenom, celebrity icon, rebellious anti-hero. And all of it rested on the shoulders of someone barely old enough to drink legally. By the time the NFL draft rolled around in 2014, Johnny Manziel was a household name, but also a red flag. Talent was never the issue. The real question was, could Johnny Manziel survive his own spotlight? The 2014 NFL Draft was supposed to be Johnny Manziel's next big moment. Coming off a dynamic college career, many expected him to be a top pick. But as Commissioner Roger Goodell read off names, Blake Bortles, Khalil Mack, Mike Evans, Manziel continued to wait. Team after team passed on him, with concerns swirling around his maturity, leadership, and lifestyle. Finally, with the 22nd overall pick, the Cleveland Browns took the gamble. The moment was pure Johnny. He flashed his trademark money fingers as he received the call. Browns fans celebrated what they thought would be the end of their quarterback drought. Manziel himself tweeted, "Just wait," a message to his doubters that his time had come. Cleveland welcomed him with open arms. Jersey sales skyrocketed. The media flooded training camp. There were cameras everywhere, fans chanting his name, and marketing departments ready to build the franchise around him. But behind the hype, there were cracks in the foundation. Johnny Manziel arrived in Cleveland still living like a college superstar. Reports of late nights and club appearances began before he even played a regular season snap. His commitment was quickly questioned. Coaches noticed he wasn't spending enough time in the playbook. Teammates grew frustrated with his lack of professionalism. When the season began, Manziel sat behind veteran Brian Hoyer. Fans clamored for Johnny to start, and eventually the team gave in. But when he finally took the field, the magic was missing. Manziel looked lost. The improvisation that worked in college didn't translate against faster, smarter NFL defenses. He finished his rookie season with more turnovers than touchdowns. Worse than the stats was his behavior off the field. Manziel was fined for flipping off the Washington bench during a preseason game. He missed team meetings. There were rumors of drinking the night before games. His lack of discipline became impossible to ignore. By his second season, the Browns were already running out of patience. He entered rehab for substance abuse before the season began, offering a chance at redemption. But even after that, the problems continued. One weekend, he reportedly skipped a scheduled treatment during the team's bye week to go partying in Texas, then lied about it, claiming the photos circulating were old. The organization had enough. Manziel was benched repeatedly. Coaches and executives lost faith. In March 2016, the Browns released him. Just 2 years after being drafted, Johnny Football was out of the NFL. His fall from grace had reached full speed, not because he lacked talent, but because he couldn't outrun the consequences of his own choices. By the time Johnny Manziel was released from the Cleveland Browns, the once celebrated Heisman winner had become a cautionary tale. But what the public didn't fully understand at the time was just how deep the collapse went. This wasn't just about bad decisions or immaturity. It was about a man unraveling behind the scenes, dealing with issues far more serious than football. Shortly after his release, the headlines turned darker. Manziel was no longer just a party animal or a disappointing draft pick. He was becoming a tabloid figure spiraling out of control. Reports of drug use and alcohol abuse became widespread. TMZ followed his every move. There were allegations of domestic violence from an ex-girlfriend, which led to legal trouble and a suspension from the NFL under the league's personal conduct policy. While his public image was burning down, privately, Johnny was in crisis. He admitted later that he had fallen into a destructive cycle of heavy drinking and drug use. He blew through nearly $5 million in 1 year, not on investments or real estate, but on flights, clothes, and partying. His life had become a blur of hotel rooms, nightclubs, and empty mornings. Perhaps the most shocking part of his story came years later in the Netflix documentary Untold Johnny Football, when Manziel revealed that during that time he had planned to end his life. After the NFL cut ties, he said he spent months on what he called a $5 million bender, a self-destructive mission that ended with him putting a loaded gun to his head and pulling the trigger. The gun, for reasons he says he still doesn't understand, failed to fire. This revelation shed light on a much deeper struggle. In 2018, Manziel publicly disclosed that he had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. For the first time, fans and critics alike began to see a more complete picture. A young man battling mental illness while trying to carry the weight of national fame, criticism, and his own expectations. Football was no longer just a missed opportunity. It was now a symbol of a life that had veered dangerously off course. The very qualities that made Johnny Manziel a sensation, his confidence, his recklessness, his disregard for convention, were also the ones that left him isolated and broken when the cameras stopped rolling. For a time, it seemed like there might be no way back. After hitting rock bottom, Johnny Manziel made his first public attempt to reshape his narrative. In 2018, he returned to the spotlight, not as an NFL star, but as a man trying to rebuild. He announced he was making a comeback, this time through the Canadian Football League, signing with the Hamilton Tiger Cats before eventually being traded to the Montreal Alouettes. For many fans, this was a glimmer of hope, a second chance. Manziel seemed sober, focused, and ready to prove he could still play. In interviews, he was candid about his struggles, admitting his mistakes and opening up about his bipolar diagnosis. He said he wanted to show people he was serious about football and about life. But on the field, it was clear that something was missing. In his CFL debut, he threw 4 interceptions in the first half. His performances were inconsistent, and his athletic edge, the improvisational magic he was once known for, appeared to be dulled. After just 8 games, he was released for reportedly violating the conditions of his contract, though the specific reasons were never made public. Undeterred, Manziel turned to the newly formed Alliance of American Football, AAF, in 2019, signing with the Memphis Express. Once again, he attracted media attention and renewed buzz, but this redemption tour would be cut short not by Manziel himself, but by the league's collapse just weeks later. His journey didn't end there. He tried his hand in the Spring League, a developmental football league, and later joined the Fan-Controlled Football League, a bizarre Twitch-streamed experiment that blended arena football with real-time fan input. He played in a few games, threw a few touchdowns, and made a few more headlines. But by this point, the narrative had shifted. Manziel wasn't seen as a serious comeback story anymore. He was a spectacle, a once great talent, now bouncing between leagues that barely stayed afloat. Through it all, Manziel maintained that he was no longer chasing an NFL dream. In interviews, he admitted that he once had everything and didn't appreciate it. Now, he claimed he was simply trying to find peace, on his own terms. The redemptions were brief. The flashes of talent, the moments of clarity, they came and went. But none of it recaptured what once was. Whether it was physical decline, emotional exhaustion, or simply a loss of passion, Johnny Manziel never truly returned to form. His comeback attempts felt more like echoes of a past life than the beginning of a new one. And yet, for many watching, there remained one burning question. Why did it all fall apart in the first place? For years, fans, critics, and the media speculated endlessly about why Johnny Manziel's career fell apart. But it wasn't until the release of Netflix's documentary, Untold Johnny Football, that we finally heard the full story, directly from the man himself. And what he revealed was more shocking, painful, and raw than most ever imagined. In the documentary, Manziel pulled back the curtain on his life during and after football, painting a portrait of someone deeply lost in a world of fame, self-destruction, and emotional pain. He admitted that from the very beginning of his NFL career, he was never fully invested. He revealed that during his time with the Cleveland Browns, he never studied film. Not once. According to Manziel, the team's staff confirmed he had a 0% engagement with their digital playbook system. He confessed that the moment he signed his NFL contract, he lost motivation. That a thing he once loved, football, had become a job, a burden, and eventually a target for his self-sabotage. He recounted how he and his inner circle even had a plan to burn through every dollar he had left, then end his life. It wasn't just a reckless phase, it was a full-on death spiral. Perhaps most heartbreaking was his honesty about how empty he felt during his meteoric rise. He said he was playing a character, Johnny Football, a persona that wasn't real, but that the world demanded he maintain. Behind the fame, he was struggling with depression, identity, and a growing sense that he was completely out of control. The louder the cheers became, the more isolated he felt. He also talked about the overwhelming pressure of being thrust into national celebrity status at just 19 years old. The expectations from fans, the scrutiny from media, and the lack of a support system capable of addressing his mental health all played a role. He admitted that he masked his internal chaos with external noise, parties, fame, money, and rebellion. The documentary didn't offer excuses. Manziel owned his actions. He didn't blame the NCAA, the NFL, or the media, though their roles were implicit. Instead, he told the truth, brutally and unapologetically, about how he lost himself while the world watched. For many viewers, Untold, Johnny Football wasn't just a sports documentary. It was a human story, one that reframed Manziel not as a failure, but as someone who never got the chance to be fully understood until it was too late. It was the clearest answer yet to the question people had been asking for years. What really happened to Johnny Football? When Johnny Manziel's career fell apart, the world was quick to point fingers. Some blamed Manziel himself, the arrogance, the partying, the apparent disregard for the game. Others blamed the Browns for drafting him in the first place. But the truth, like most collapses, is more complicated. To understand what really went wrong, we have to look beyond just the headlines and into the system that built and broke Johnny Football. At the center of it all was a young man thrust into a spotlight that few people, let alone teenagers, are equipped to handle. Manziel went from a small-town quarterback to a national celebrity, seemingly overnight. He became a brand, a symbol, and a spectacle, all before his 21st birthday. The NCAA, his college, the media, and corporate sponsors all capitalized on the Johnny Football persona, even while rules prohibited him from earning a dime off his name. And the system celebrated his wild side when it sold tickets and generated clicks, but recoiled when the consequences followed. The media hyped his every move, his every tweet, his every misstep, but rarely asked how he was doing. There was no safety net, no structure built to protect young athletes from themselves, no pause to consider whether Johnny Manziel, the person, was keeping up with Johnny Football, the brand. And then there's the NFL. The Cleveland Browns, desperate for a star, overlooked the red flags. Manziel reportedly bombed interviews, came with warning signs, and had a reputation for partying, but was still picked in the first round. Why? Because the upside was too tempting. But once he arrived, there was little mentorship or guidance. His off-field issues weren't managed. They were tolerated until they became too big to ignore. Could things have been different if he had been drafted into a more stable organization? Could mentorship from a veteran quarterback have made an impact? Could earlier mental health support or a more honest environment around fame have changed the outcome? These questions don't have clear answers, but they deserve to be asked. Yes, Johnny made decisions that hurt his career. He's owned that. But he was also a young man consumed by a system that chews up talent and spits it out. Fame without foundation, pressure without preparation, and a game that, for all its billions, often fails the people who give it everything. In the end, Johnny Manziel's downfall wasn't just about bad choices. It was about what happens when an unstable individual meets an unforgiving machine. And once the headlines faded, all that was left was a person who needed help far earlier than anyone realized. Today, Johnny Manziel lives a very different life from the one he once knew. The sold-out stadiums, national endorsements, and ESPN top plays are long gone. But in many ways, the man behind the persona is finally starting to come into focus. After years of silence, denial, and chaos, Johnny has found a sense of peace, not through a football comeback, but through personal acceptance. Manziel has made it clear that he no longer has ambitions of returning to the NFL. Instead, he's chosen to reconnect with the sport on his own terms. In 2021, he joined the Fan-Controlled Football League, a tech-forward, crowd-interactive league where fans call plays in real time and games are streamed online. It's far from the NFL, but it's football without the pressure. And for Johnny, that's exactly what he wanted. In that league, he's not a superstar, he's a participant. He plays, signs autographs, laughs on the sideline, and seems, for the first time in years, content. He said in interviews that he's done chasing dreams that were never really his to begin with. He knows now that he never truly loved football the way people thought he did. He played because he was great at it, because it opened doors, but not because it filled him. Outside of football, Johnny has slowly rebuilt his life. He's remained active on social media, engaged with fans, and most importantly, spoken more openly about his struggles. He's become an advocate, not in the formal sense, but through brutal honesty. He doesn't romanticize his past, nor does he try to erase it. He owns it. Every misstep, every fall, every dark moment. He's also invested more in his mental health. Since revealing his bipolar disorder diagnosis, Manziel has spoken about therapy, learning self-control, and trying to live a more stable life. He admits he still has good days and bad days. He's not perfect. But for someone who once admitted he didn't think he'd live past 24, simply being here is a kind of victory. There are still critics, of course. People who will always label him a bust or a wasted talent. But those labels don't define Johnny anymore. He's no longer Johnny Football. He's just Johnny Manziel, a man who flew too close to the sun, came crashing down, and lived to talk about it. In a sports world obsessed with success stories, Johnny's may not fit the mold, but it's real. And that honesty might just be more powerful than any touchdown he ever scored. Johnny Manziel's story doesn't have the fairy tale ending fans once hoped for. He didn't redeem himself in the NFL, lead a team to a Super Bowl, or rewrite his legacy with a second act. Instead, his story is one of raw humanity, a meteoric rise, a devastating fall, and an ongoing journey toward self-understanding. In many ways, Johnny became a victim of a system that was never built to support someone like him. The NCAA, media, and NFL were quick to elevate him into a spectacle, a brand, a walking headline. But no one asked if the person behind Johnny Football, the real Johnny, was ready for what came with it. Fame amplified everything, the highs, the lows, and the internal battles he didn't yet have the tools to face. Yes, Johnny made mistakes. He hurt teammates, disappointed coaches, and let down fans. But beneath the surface was a young man dealing with mental illness, addiction, and an identity crisis in front of millions. The courage it took to speak openly about those experiences shouldn't be overlooked. His career may have ended in disappointment, but his life didn't. Today, he's still standing, still learning, still growing. He's no longer trying to be a role model. And maybe that's what makes him one. Because for all the touchdowns and tabloid stories, the most powerful thing Johnny Manziel ever did was survive. Not just the league, but himself. So what really happened to Johnny Football? He lived the dream and the nightmare, all before turning 25. He burned fast, burned bright, and nearly burned out. But he's still here. And that, in itself, is a kind of triumph. Thanks for watching. If this story made you think differently about Johnny Manziel or about the way we treat young athletes, let us know in the comments. Like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who remembers the legend of Johnny Football. Because now, they know the truth behind the collapse.